All right, I guess it does. Welcome to Let's Talk Native. It is November 17th. One second.
I was trying to cross.
All right, we're going to get this figured out here. I'm having a bumpy start here. All right, I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native. We are broadcasting on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast on the Gwe, CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. That is where you can listen to our audio. We stream audio there 24/7 there, so you can check it out anytime. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. I am joined by Jake Proud in studio, who is manning our cameras for both the our Facebook Live stream, our feed, as well as capturing that video for our YouTube channel. And I hope that you will check out our Let's Talk Native TV YouTube channel. That's where we post the shows and some other videos as well. Hey, look, I also want to give thanks to Kelly McMillan, who is our studio engineer. She's the one responsible for our setup, who really helps us get this thing, keep us going, keep us doing what we do here. So I want to thank her. I've got a few things to talk about here today. Of course, we are streaming live on Facebook, and I appreciate all of you who take the time to check out the show, both on the audio and the Facebook live stream. We do this because frankly, there's conversations that we just simply have to have, and that's what we encourage here. There are things that are happening on a daily basis that sometimes are frankly they're hard to stay up on. As after I did my show in New York yesterday, I do a show on Thursdays from 10 till noon in New York City, and on my train ride back, I get the news that the Keystone XL pipeline has burst and has dumped 5,000 barrels of oil in South Dakota, and wow, who saw that coming? This is why we protest these things. This is why the Dakota Access Pipeline has been resisted in the way that it has. And frankly, we know that these pipelines leak. It's what they do. It is invariably what's going to happen. This is a brand new pipeline. This is brand new. This is like the Dakota Access Pipeline, just built. These are fresh welds, folks. But there's nothing. When they advertise that these pipelines are the safest way to transport fuel, they base it on statistics that say, well, it's safer than putting it on a truck and hauling it, or it's safer than putting it on a tanker. Well, I mean, the bottom line is, if this stuff is so dangerous to transport, what does that say about the risks associated with it? And then they say, well, this is going to be in the safest pipeline ever built. That's what they said about the Keystone XL pipeline. That's what they say about the Dakota Access Pipeline. Well, there's no new technology here. It's metal pipe. It's steel pipe, welded. There's monitoring systems and that kind of stuff. But, even as they've sent robots through these pipelines to do inspections, they fudge that information. Look, this is about making money. This isn't about energy independence. So all of the claim, oh, yeah, we need to build these pipelines because we need to have energy security. We need to know that this oil is coming from our domestic sources and from friendly countries like Canada. Look, none of that oil, and I'm using the term very loosely when I talk about it being oil, because this is tar that has been separated from sand in Alberta. It is the dirtiest oil on the planet. In fact, they don't even call it crude oil. They call it bitumen, because that's what they've done. They've actually separated this tar, and it's this gooey substance, and then they add more chemicals to it, so it's more, so it's more liquefied, and so they can make it flow better. So they put this dirtiest oil on the planet in this pipeline, and it's not for U.S. consumption. China has bought all of the tar sands oil, essentially all of it, from Canada in advance. They bought it sitting in the ground. So the Keystone XL pipeline is not about domestic supply. It is not about the U.S. buying oil from its friendly neighbor to the north. No. What the Keystone XL pipeline is, it's about facilitating Canada's sale of their natural resource or their petroleum resources to Canada. And because they don't want to put together the facilities to process this stuff, and the Gulf of Mexico already has these refineries that are grandfathered in, regardless of the Clean Air, Clean Water Act, all of these environmental protections that say, we can't build new refineries that aren't going to meet these standards. Well, the oil industry has these old refineries that are grandfathered in under that aren't beholden to these regulations. So the best way to get this dirtiest oil on the planet to China is to build a pipeline and push it down into the Gulf of these Gulf Coast refineries, so they can put the product on ships to send it. I mean, when they say, "Well, it's better than putting in tankers," it's going to go in tankers eventually anyway. This stuff is being trucked across or piped across the United States, crossing the border, going through predominantly native lands, of course, the sacrifice zones. Remember, we used that expression before, the sacrifice zones. So yeah, using these sacrifice zones to run these pipelines through, and then they've also touted that these pipelines were going to be job creators. Look, these were Canadian crews. It was even Canadian steel for the most part. That was going to be, it's a Canadian pipeline. It's TransCanada's pipeline. It runs through the United States, but it's their pipeline. It's their product. It is product that, the only oil that's going to, out of the tar sands oil that's going to land in the United States, the stuff that leaks out of the pipeline. Yeah. These 5,000 barrels that leaked all over the ground. Yeah, that's the domestic supply that that the United States is getting, because none of it is destined for the United States. It's all destined for China. So when they talk about job creation, you know what jobs are created? The cleanup crews, the unskilled labor that's going to get in there to clean up the mess that they make every time one of these pipelines leak, and they all leak. They like to say, well, the older ones are leaking, but the new ones won't leak. Yes, they do. And just think about this. They've got a pipeline, not this one, but the Dakota Access Pipeline is running under the Missouri River. Under the Missouri River. Oh yeah, and they're gonna make sure that the pipeline. How are they going to maintain the integrity of a pipeline? And let's be honest here, the ground, the Earth, the planet is not an inanimate object. It moves. It moves. I mean, not just with earthquakes and the Earth moves. It's what it does. So the idea of trying to put this rigid steel pipe under a body of water, under a river, yeah, that's good thinking. That's going to be secure. And how are they going to know when that one leaks? They'll know when the oil starts percolating up through the river. And of course, they do monitor this stuff. But think about this. Even with all their sophisticated monitoring systems, 5,000 barrels of oil would leak out before they would be, they should have automatic shutoffs and all these other things. We're the safest pipeline on the planet. Yeah, right. So, I mean, when the news broke of this thing leaking oil, I don't know who was shocked. I mean, that's why people have protested both Keystone XL Pipeline and the Dakota Access Pipeline. And that's why people are protesting the gas lines, the gas pipelines, all of this stuff. It is all, I mean, and the crazy part about it is the federal government, regardless of who's in charge, Democrats or Republicans, they refer to these pipelines as federal infrastructure projects. Like somehow this is for our benefit. Even the Dakota Access Pipeline, much of that oil is being exported. Oh, they say, oh no, we're not exporting that oil. Yes, you are. I mean, when the tribal council from Standing Rock had their meeting with Energy Transfer Company, the company putting in the Dakota Access Pipeline. They kind of busted them on that, and they had no answer. They had no real viable response. This, folks, is it. I mean, this is kind of this is where racism and environmental racism and sacrifice zones, all of that stuff come into play. Because they wouldn't run this pipeline, well, I'm going to say they wouldn't run this pipeline, by urban areas. I mean, they're going to run it through the least populated and the most marginalized people. I say that, but you know what? When with the powers that be, with the oil industry and with the government, the unbelievable government support for the fossil fuels industry, there's no telling what they would really do. Honestly, there's no telling what they would really do. Because I take the train to New York every week, and as I take the train out to Albany, and then the train turns and heads down south along the Hudson River, I look across the Hudson River, and on the other side are trains carrying, they call them bomb trains. They're carrying this Bakken crude from North Dakota down to New Jersey and Philadelphia. And and people are oblivious to it. I mean, the fact that these trains carrying crude oil, again, a very volatile crude oil at that, because the Bakken crude has a very low flash point. It's a very dangerous crude, and they run them right by. They run it by a nuclear power plant. They run it, they run it by schoolyards or playgrounds. Yeah, I mean, you see these fabulous homes up on the hills, as you look across the Hudson River, and then you look right at the river level, and there's a set of tracks. I'm on a set of tracks on the Amtrak on the other side of the river, but it's only hauling people, and we're running right along the edges of the river. Tracks on both sides. Amtrak on one side, CSX on the other. Now, the other thing that has to be made clear is, the other thing we hear as well, with this, domestic supply and the myth that somehow this tar sands oil is for domestic use. There's this myth that somehow it's going to keep oil prices low, and that would make sense. Except for some of this oil extraction, including the Bakken crude, but specifically with tar sands oil, it's not profitable when a barrel of oil is low. When that barrel of oil gets below $70, it doesn't even make it's not profitable to haul to get the tar sands oil out. Again, when I say it's the dirtiest oil on the planet, think about a process that means you have to mine gooey sand, and then you have to run it through a process where they pipe in natural gas so they can superheat steam, and use steam and hot water to separate the goo from the sand. And then they have these huge lakes that has to receive this water, and those lakes are, they've got dirty sand on the bottom, they've got dirty water above that, and then they have a layer of oil above that. That's what these huge they call them settling ponds, and they even scoop off some of the oil on the top. But scooping off the oil isn't the process. That's kind of what they do because that's the byproduct of trying to separate the oil from the from the sand. But it is a dirty process. It's an energy intensive process. They have to literally have gas pipelines going up to Alberta, so they can extract this oil. Now, the other thing they did, here's a great plan. The other thing they did is they drilled wells or holes into the ground where, when they know that this tar sands oil runs deep, they drill holes in the ground, and then they superheat hot water and they pump it into the ground so the oil can percolate up, so they can separate it. They try to separate it within the ground. And of course, this is just forcing hot water and goo and bitumen, all of this stuff into all kinds of aquifers and everything else. It is an incredible process, and this incredible process is brought to you by Canada. Canada, that place that people associate with pristine wilderness and human rights and socialized medicine and everything that is nice in the world is Canada until you go there. Look, you can go on Google Earth and you can zoom in on Fort McMurray up in Alberta, and you want to see just absolute devastation. Take a look for yourself. And if you can find videos, all over the internet of helicopter flybys and that kind of stuff of just what a mess. Just the absolute devastation. I mean, the whole process starts by stripping out the forest. They literally clear the boreal forest because they cut all the wood out of there first. And then they can start mining. They mine the sand. And then of course they process it. So this is the mess. All for chasing the dollar. And like I said, let's be clear. This isn't about domestic supply or keeping the price of oil down. The oil industry wants the price to go up. I mean, in fact, part of what's keeping the price low is the OPEC nations, who are a little concerned about when the price goes up, they know that the global oil supply is going to be fed by some of these not so efficient processes like tar sands oil and Bakken crude extraction and that kind of stuff. So one of the ways to combat that is to gut the price, and that's why OPEC nations have kept the price of oil low. Of course, they can't do that forever, and in the end, it's not necessarily in their best interest either. Venezuela is starving to death because their oil, again, it's not tar sands oil, but it's not just poke a hole in the ground and let the oil leak pour out like Jed Clampett up through the ground bubbling crude. It's nothing like that. So their oil extraction has a price tag to it as well, and so keeping the price down low is costing everybody money. I mean, every oil producing nation is losing money because they simply aren't charging enough. So these oil companies that are in tar sands oil and Bakken crude, but tar sands in particular, they want the price to get above $100 a barrel. $70 a barrel, they're just they're making money. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're making money, but it's not the profit that they want. I mean, the model for extracting tar sands oil was based on $100 a barrel because they figure eventually that's where it's going to be, and that's where they want to drive it to be. So if you think that that Bakken crude or tar sands oil or any of these these supplies of oil that people are saying are there all for us, no, they aren't. They aren't there for us. You know what they're there for? The oil companies. The Keystone XL pipeline, it's not there for anybody except for the oil companies. And see, the oil companies are making money. I mean, it's not for domestic supply, but it's not to say that domestic oil refineries aren't making money. Sure, they're making money. That's why these federal infrastructure. I mean, think about the dollars that go into these pipelines, tax dollars even, but not even just the tax dollars, but the leases that the easements that are given up, and all of the land. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers, their role in the Dakota Access Pipeline. I mean, there's tax dollars involved here, folks, and there are American resources and native resources that are being sacrificed for these pipelines. And so the idea that this one is leaking, it's going to leak again. I mean, yeah, they'll fix it. But, I mean, this is a brand new pipeline. Why did it leak? Well, for a variety of reasons. For one thing, this oil is very corrosive that they're sending through this pipeline. So this is kind of a new animal. This isn't, what has been out there. So there's new lessons to be learned here. And of course it's very thick. So it's being, they've got certain wall thickness on this pipeline so they can handle certain pressures. So and of course because it's being pumped at higher pressures, it makes it more dangerous. I mean, I don't think any native person was surprised by this news. In fact, we've been just kind of waiting for it. And not that we're hoping that these things leak. We don't. But see, this is the problem, and I got to come back to this because somebody asked me, posted on Facebook just yesterday, how do we break the addiction to fossil fuels? Well, you know what? Here's the addiction to the addiction to fossil fuels is, I mean, who are the dealers? I mean, you want to talk about addiction? The federal government is involved in the process. They subsidize. They have all kinds of tax benefits and government subsidies supporting the fossil fuels industry. There is no question that those who have taken the time to look, and of course the technology that's out there for wind and solar and other forms of natural energy, everybody knows that it's ultimately going to replace this stuff. They know that the fossil fuel industry is not sustainable. The thing that's sustaining it most of all is government, the financial institutions, and the transportation industry. I mean, those things. I mean, industry supports the fossil fuels because it's what they have. It's what they know. And banks, my friend, my friend Johnny Rice just got arrested on Monday for her and her friend climbed the flagpole at Chase headquarters, Morgan Stanley headquarters down in Lower Manhattan, and they hung a big banner that says Chase #1 in Wall Street and in Dakota or tar sands oil. I mean, it's ironic that they were literally hung this banner in opposition to Chase's investment in tar sands oil, and then the thing leaks a few days later. I mean, it is a coincidence. I mean, obviously, nobody was up there poking holes in this pipeline. But we're still protesting, tar sands oil pipelines, Dakota Access Pipeline, and of course, the role that all of this financial investment is playing in climate change. So, my friend is down there, and she's my co-host down in New York. She was sitting in the studio with me this week. We talked a little bit about what they had done. I mean, as we're sitting there, we don't know because I don't know when the news broke on the Dakota, the Keystone XL pipeline leaking. I didn't hear about it till I was on my train ride home, and it's like, man, when anybody says, well, who thought that would happen? Well, who didn't think it was going to happen? And that's the concern about the Dakota Access Pipeline. We know it's going to leak. In fact, I think it's already leaked in a few places. No major leaks, but that's it. And it's all about the government supporting that industry. Wind and solar could dramatically change the entire grid system. I mean, it could dramatically change it. But there has to be if they had the investment that is going into pipelines and oil extraction and all of this for profit destruction of the earth, if they had the support, if wind and solar had the support that the fossil fuels industry had, we'd be miles ahead. So when somebody asks me how do we break the addiction, it's going to get broken because it's unsustainable. The addiction to fossil fuels is going to break because it's unsustainable. But having said that, there are powers that be who are going to make sure they can get every dime. I mean, every dollar out of the earth. They can. I mean, because here's the thing, and I've talked about this before. Extraction industries, in of themselves, as dangerous and degrading as they are to the environment, the factor that makes them even worse isn't just the process. It isn't just the idea of tearing the surface of our mother apart. It's the rate that they do it. The earth is an amazing thing in its ability to heal itself. But when you are destroying mountains to extract coal, when you look at these fracking fields, when you look at the way that they have to, again, there's a critical mass that they factor in for profitability, and it ignores what that critical mass is for environmental degradation. So the rate at which natural gas is being extracted from the earth, the rate at which coal was being pulled out of mountain removal mining. The rate at which tar sands oil is being dug out of Alberta, the rate at which that oil exploration and extraction happens, that's when you factor that in with what the actual process is, that's what makes it so bad. And why is it being done at the rate that it's being done? Because it's about profitability. It's about making every dime you can for as long as you can. It's about finding every barrel of oil the earth has hidden someplace and getting it out while that market is still ripe. Because it's not going to be ripe forever. I mean, this is, and again, where this factors into things like environmental racism is who are the first victims of this environmental degradation? These environmental catastrophes. When you talk about a pipeline busting in South Dakota, who do you think are primarily the people around that area? I mean, and this is the world that we live in, a world that doesn't care because it's geared towards money. This is that whole free market. Remember that free market system? The free market system that is selling tar sands oil to China, which isn't a free market. I mean, the hypocrisy and the absolute contradiction in all of this stuff. It's just amazing. It's amazing the line of BS that we are fed on a daily basis, just so people won't oppose what is being done by the people with money and power to get it done. It's incredible. Hey, look, we're gonna go out with another Murray Porter tune here. We talked a little bit about racism, so we'll do some. It's called White Man's Card, Murray Porter.
Trying to cross the border to the good old USA. Man said, where you come from, boy? How long you gonna stay? I said, I'm from the 6th Nation, and Reserve, don't know when I'm coming back. He said, I'll have to see your Indian car. I said, why don't you tell me, Jack? Where's your white man's car? Prove to me that you ain't black. Where's your white man's car? Yes, sir, please get off my back. I don't have no bow and arrow. That don't mean I want to attack. I went uptown to the drugstore just to buy a pair of shades. The man behind the counter said that'll be $15.98. I said, I don't have to pay no tax on that. He said, oh, not one of you again. I'll have to see your Indian car. I said, why don't you tell me, friend? Where's your white man's car? Prove to me you ain't black. Where's your white man's car? Yes, sir, please get off my back. I don't have no bow and arrow, but that don't mean I wanna attack. Come on. tax return from you in 20 years. We'll have to see your Indian card or throw your ass in jail. Where's your white man's card? Prove to me that you ain't black. Where's your white man's card? Mr. P, get off my back.
All right, where's your white man's card? Once you have one of those, you can do all kinds of things. Yeah, when you get your white man's card, you can make a mess of the planet, and man, that's just what they're doing. It's incredible. I mean, I don't. As much as none of us are surprised about what's transpired here with the Keystone XL pipeline, it is still. I guess it still amazes us. I mean, I guess we still are surprised because even when our predictions come true, and we don't wish it to happen, we warn of it happening, and then when it happens, we're more devastated. I mean, let's face it, the oil companies, it's a PR problem for them. It's not even much of a financial problem for them. I mean, they've got those kind of losses factored in. I mean, it's the way it's the cost of doing business. We are the cost of their doing business, and it's what's so frustrating about it all. Hey, look, I want to move on. We've talked about the throughway issue, and the fact that like the 5 mile, and it's only about 5 miles section of the throughway that crosses the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and it is in deplorable shape, and it has been in just It is the worst section of the thruway, and there's no question about that. I mean, not only is the road surface in terrible shape, even the bridges that were going over the cross. I mean, you stood a chance that chunks of concrete from the bridges that cross over the thruway on Seneca land could have come through your windshield. There were chunks of the bridges that cross over the thruway on Seneca territory. There were chunks of it falling onto the thruway on a daily basis. They finally fixed them, but not without controversy, not without Andrew Cuomo having to be pushed. He literally had to be forced to do it because he was trying to avoid doing the bridge work. We live in a time where the conflict between the state and native territories is really getting to an all-time high, and of course it's tied to this, to the gaming revenue sharing. I mean, the state is in terrible shape financially. As much as they're, the state comptroller is calling down Niagara Falls for its gross mismanagement of funds and how they've allocated, dollars, especially some of this gaming revenue. It turns out that the state may be $4 billion behind in its budget at the end of this year because the taxes aren't coming up to what they expected them to be. I mean, the taxes are not adding up the way they expected it to be. And of course, there's other factors that are really deeply concerning, and of course, that's the stuff that Trump and the Republicans are doing to these budget cuts and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's the New York State is in some dire in a dire circumstance because of how they manage money. But the fact that you can actually look and see a vindictiveness by Andrew Cuomo towards the Senecas, and part of it, obviously when they're crying poverty because of their own mismanagement of dollars and resources, and of course they're spending. They're going to scapegoat the Senecas on this gaming revenue share, and you know what, $1 billion over 15 years is a lot to you and I. It's a lot to the region, but $1 billion over 15 years to the state, they spend that in a week. They spend that in a week in Medicare. And of course, they're going to be they're looking at being $4 billion in debt at the end of this fiscal year. So the $120 million that they're trying to fight the Senecas over is still a drop in a bucket to the problems they have. I mean, the Senecas are no sooner going to solve the state budget woes than they are going to solve Niagara Falls budget woes. They really aren't. But I want to get back to the throughway issue Because a friend of mine, and I'm not going to give her name because she hasn't given me permission to do so, but a friend of mine wrote a letter to the Thruway Authority, and she wanted some answers, and she raised some issues. And I don't have a copy of her letter, but I have a copy of the response. And the response came from Matthew Driscoll, who's the acting executive director of the New York State Thruway Authority. And this is what he writes, and you got to hear this stuff because it. Well, let me just read it. It said, "On behalf of Governor Cuomo, thank you for conveying your concerns regarding the section of the New York State Thruway, I-90, that runs through the Seneca Nation. This is a road that traverses the Seneca community, and therefore, like any community impacted by our projects, we work with them to help mitigate any disruption to the road work, any disruption the road work may cause. Until the roadway is fully repaired, interim measures have been taken. As you know, the speed limit has been lowered to 55 miles an hour through the section. Additionally, in 2016, surface repairs were made to the wheel path. The wheel path is the area approximately 40 inches wide for each tire where motorist wheels meet the road. This work was done on the eastbound and the westbound lanes, just one lane of both directions. We are working towards a permanent repair, repaving slash repaving in this area. You know, this Driscoll, he writes, as you know, the speed limit has been lowered. I didn't know it. I mean, and there's a reason that I didn't know that the speed limit has been lowered on this section of road. It's because we don't travel the Thruway to cross native lands. We don't travel the Thruway to go from one end of, to traverse Seneca territory. The road wasn't built for us. And this notion that a road that traverses the Seneca territory, therefore, like any community impacted by our projects, we work with them to mitigate any disruption to the road. Look, you don't have to mitigate disruption to our travel of that road because we don't travel it. And we've got other roads to travel on if we're going to cross our territory than the Thruway. I mean, I'm not saying we don't travel the Thruway to go to Buffalo from Cattaraugus, or jump on the Thruway section down in Irving to go to Erie or to Dunkirk or whatever else. But the section of road that traverses Seneca territory, that's not widely used by us. Why would we jump on that just to cross, go from one side of the territory to the other? It doesn't. I mean, it's not the long way of the territory. It's the narrow part of the territory. So, but the idea that the road is in such bad shape that they actually had to lower the speed limit on that section. I didn't know that. I mean, that's incredible to me. I mean, that is absolutely incredible that they would have to lower the speed limit on that section of road. There is no other section of the Thruway, and I travel a lot of the Thruway, that they have to lower the speed limit because they've let the state of the status of the condition of that road degrade so much. And then their idea of doing a temporary fix is we're just going to pave a section where we think the wheels are going to travel on. Yeah, how does that work out when you get big rigs and that kind of stuff traveling on a black-topped section, just a wheel path along the Thruway? I mean, that is incredible. Not to mention, there are chunks of this thing kicking up. There are chunks of broken pavement that are kicking up along the road. I mean, I did travel it just because I had to witness it myself. It is incredible, and you know what? It is race-based. I mean, this is the governor taking a shot back at the Seneca Nation, the Seneca people. And of course, it's ridiculous because we don't travel a section of road. But you know what? It's Seneca land. And I'll tell you, their inability to be appropriate and proper custodians of the road that they built on an easement, on a road that is built on Seneca land. And make no mistake about it, they don't own the land. They only purchased an easement at a bargain basement price. So to me, it's incredible. That I'm actually surprised that that there was a response, and a response that, that wasn't just a form letter. I mean, and maybe this response has been sent out to the various people inquiring about this, but it looks pretty specific. But to say, oh, well, as you know, we've lowered the speed limit. Oh, well, thank you for that. That really helped us out a lot. The question from a Seneca standpoint is, why aren't you fulfilling your obligation? And if you're trying to be vindictive here on behalf of Governor Cuomo, give me a freaking break. I mean, the governor actually got slapped back by the federal government a few years ago, and it was several Seneca administrations ago, that the governor was trying to utilize federal transportation funds in places that the federal government hadn't designated them. I mean, when the federal government provides certain dollars for interstates and and again for federal infrastructure projects, they specifically designate where it's supposed to be used. And when the governor tried to redirect the funds that were supposed to go to these bridges that I was talking about, the federal government had to slam him. Said, no, you don't get to choose. But somehow he's been able to choose to pave every other sections that were in far better shape than this section that goes through Seneca territory. And again, there are lots of areas of the thruway that have been had work done to it, and of course the whole thruway is just a lesson in neglect. Now here's the other part that is just ironic about all this stuff. One of the big hallmark accomplishments that Andrew Cuomo is claiming is the rebuilding of the Tappan Zee Bridge. Although we're not going to call it the Tappan Zee Bridge anymore. A $4 billion bridge that's going to bear the name of his father, the Mario Cuomo Memorial Bridge. Yeah, what a great sound that has to it. So this $4 billion bridge that Andrew Cuomo is building, he made it very clear that that revenue from the entire stretch of the thruway, including this 5 miles that goes through Seneca territory, is going to be used to pay for the offset the cost of that bridge. Of course, it ran way over budget, as these projects always do. And of course, then they're going to charge an exorbitant amount to cross the bridge. So this great signature, this beautiful piece of engineering that crosses a really wide stretch of the of the Hudson River. I go by it every week, and I know some native guys who've worked on that project. But I travel it and I see it every week, and it's a spectacular looking bridge. $4 billion worth, and even the folks traveling the thruway out here in Western New York, they're footing the bill for it. They're footing the bill for it because they're using revenue from the thruway, and that was the news. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. That's what they said, that revenue from the entire stretch of the thruway is going to help offset the cost of this bridge. So not only has major sections of the thruway been repaved that were in nowhere near in the adverse shape that the section that goes through Seneca territory is, but the Mario Cuomo Bridge is pulling in, costing too much money. It's costing so much money that they've got to lower the speed limit on the section of thruway that crosses Seneca territory and put wheel patches in. I'm just blown away by this stuff. But this is the relationship that we have with the state of New York. This is the relationship we have. So, as and I've covered much of the battle the Senecas are having with the state over this gaming revenue issue, and of course Niagara Falls, they had their election and they got new candidates coming in, some that are supposed to have a bit more of an open mind. Who knows what's going to happen with this thing going forward? But I'll tell you, until people realize that the relationships we have to foster and care for most are the ones who are closest by us. That's why you take care of your family first. And then you look to your community and then your region. What the folks here in Western New York have to realize is that the priorities of Albany are not the priorities of Western New York. I know the governor came out this past week and throwing some money at some after-school programs in Niagara Falls and Buffalo. I mean, the school, the school systems in Buffalo and Niagara Falls are really dreadful, and it's not because of lack of funding, and of course, more money always helps. But how is that money being used? I mentioned it before that for the tens of millions of dollars that have flowed to the city of Buffalo, Buffalo's only Native American magnet school gets no dollars specifically from the city of Buffalo to maintain their magnet school status. They have not one. They don't have a single full-time Native teacher at the Buffalo School 19, Buffalo, the Native American magnet school. They get about $16 million a year in federal funds for their magnet school programs. None of that $16 million goes into that. And do you think the state would have, or the city, Byron Brown would have said, we've got dollars that come in from the Seneca Nation, through from the state through the Seneca Nation. Maybe we should earmark some of those dollars for the Native American school. But no, that doesn't happen. We have to. I mean, when the Senecas say, "Look, we're willing to be good neighbors," this is something that has to be mutual. I mean, the Seneca Nation could put an offer out all day long for people to come to the table, but nobody's come. Nobody from Niagara Falls has said, look, we understand that the position the Seneca Nation has taken, that the revenue sharing has termed out, but you've put the offer out there, for us to sit and talk about things like service agreements and that kind of stuff. Nobody from Niagara Falls has done that yet. Nobody from Buffalo or even Salamanca has done that yet. Ironically, the three mayors of those towns are Democrats, and they seem to be packed in so tightly behind Andrew Cuomo that they're afraid to move without his, not just without his blessing, but without his permission and support to do it. I've said it before. If Cuomo wanted to show leadership, sometimes being a leader is getting out of the way. He should be telling these three municipalities, look, make the best deal you can with the Seneca Nation. We're going to fight this thing out, and we may or may not be, we may or may not prevail in this thing, but work out whatever you can. But no, instead he wants these guys lined up with him politically. So I mean that's kind of where this whole thing ends up being. It's it's a pretty incredible day when you see how bad the relationships can be between the state and the federal government. I mean, obviously there's a lot of concern about what this moron in the White House is doing. This budget cut that the House just passed. I mean, many of us, we just sit here and look at this thing and just shake our heads and just amazed what I posted an article that somebody had written that says, are Americans that stupid? And it talks about not only their ability to do something like elect a guy like Donald Trump, but just to sit back and let trillions of dollars be spent on national defense for a country that is not at risk. If there's one country on the planet that is not at risk, it's the United States. And yet trillions of dollars, 4 times more than any other country. If you add the next 4 countries combined that are on the top of the list in military spending, it doesn't meet, what the United States is spending. Military presence in 110 countries, not just presence, but active military in 110 places in countries of the world. A for-profit medical system, healthcare system that just rapes people. It not just rapes people in terms of dollars, but it rapes them in terms of health. I mean, this opiate crisis was caused by the medical the healthcare industry. I mean, Obamacare has nothing to do with healthcare. It has to do with health insurance. Health insurance is not health care. It's a financial product. It is a financial product. It's incredible that Americans tolerate what this country has done in terms of debt, its deficit spending, the amount of money they spend on the military, the amount of money they expect people to pay for health care. No other country, I mean, the next 30 countries, below the United States in terms of, if you think the United States is number one, which it isn't, if you were to list the next 30 countries, they all have universal health care. Not the United States. Why? Because it's money. Because money needs to be made out of health care. These are the wealthy people. The wealthy people are either in insurances or they're in the healthcare industry. And I'm not talking about nurses, doctors. Some, but the ones who are in the pharmaceutical industry, who are in the medical testing industry, the medical equipment industry. This is where people are being, again, literally raped. And all the while, this is, we face these challenges. Look, I talk about 4 risks that I think are real and imminent. And of course, the first risk that we're fools to not be concerned about is climate change. Climate change is real, and climate change is it's for one thing, we've already done enough damage to the environment that we can't stop climate change, but we're not even preparing ourselves to adapt to it, and we're not doing anything to mitigate additional damage to to the planet. So climate change is real, and it can have devastating effects. Not just the intensity of storms, but drought and famine. Forest fires are oftentimes caused by this stuff. So we have flooding, we have drought, we have rising sea levels, we have hurricanes, the likes of which we haven't seen before. So we have all of this stuff, and that's one of the concerns. Now, 2 of the other concerns that I have to do with the volatility of governance of the major countries of the planet. I mean, there's so much government corruption, and of course now you've got governments like you got a tick like North Korea that is just irritating the likes of Donald Trump, and they brought us to the brink of nuclear war. And of course you have the conflict in the Middle East that never seems to end. It just perpetuates itself between Israel and Muslim countries. You've got the Arab countries all fighting each other. Saudi Arabia. I mean, it's really an incredible, volatile mix of potential calamity on the political side, and I'm talking about everything from war to flat out, revolutions in countries. And part of this stuff isn't even the people. It's the political systems. I mean, look at the mess that the United States is. Not only did they elect Donald Trump, but look at the mess associated with the DNC and all the corruption associated with the womanizing and the sexual misconduct. The corruption associated with Andrew Cuomo and the pay to play. George Maziar is up in Niagara Falls. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, you've got politicians going to prison. The third one that concerns me is social unrest. And I'm not just talking about Black Lives Matter or Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. There's some real problems socially, and I'll tell you, racism is front and center. And it's become fashionable. There are plenty of people who are just right out of the closet with the racism, more so than has been since the 60s. So there's social unrest. But I'll tell you, of the 3 that I've mentioned, there's one that's even more concerning to me, and I've mentioned it before, and that's economic collapse. The entire global economy is running primarily on credit. not on gross national product, not on currency, not on any kind of backed currency or or secure. Even it's not even really secured credit. If it starts to top, if what happened in 2008 with the crisis that where the banks had to be bailed out, if that were to happen today, they wouldn't be able to bail them out. They couldn't drop interest rates because they're already dropped. They're bottomed out. And there are more lines of credit at risk today than there was in 2008. I mean, the two calamities are climate change and economic collapse. And they could feed the other two that I was talking about. We need to prepare ourselves. And I'm not saying dig bunkers or anything else. I'm not talking about that. But I'll tell you, we've got to prepare ourselves for what's coming. This is why last week when I talked about education, the education we need, not the education we have, we do need to raise a generation of activists, and those activists have to be people who are encouraged to solve problems, the problems that we have failed to address, that we have failed to solve. It is we're reaching a tipping point on, like I said, on four levels, and we as Native people, we can isolate ourselves from some of this stuff. We may be in the catbird seat on this stuff, because our social, fabric, we've got problems, but we don't have the problems that they have, in some of this racial climate that exists out there. We could argue about whether, Seneca politics or Native politics is where it should be, but the people still really wield a lot of power in our territories. We can fix this stuff, and we may be in better shape than Americans, and certainly people in other countries. But we can't ignore what's coming. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching Armageddon or end of days or anything else. It's not that. Most of the stuff is just man-made stuff. This isn't something that's coming down from from creation. Even the climate change stuff is man-made. This is what man has created. The potential for political unrest and social unrest, climate change, and economic chaos. This is what we're up against, folks. All right, hey, we're just about out of time here, so I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE Family of Businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, and the friends who make contributions, Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice and Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and the Seneca Nation, and many others who've helped the program. We're in our 8th year, and most of all, I got to thank you for listening. So, look, we're gonna we'll go out with a John McLeod song, I think. So we'll try that, and we'll see you on Monday.
Dog will bite you if you get in her face. My dog will bite you if you get in her space. If I tell her not to, she'll bite you anyway.